my name is John Appa, and I'm here to introduce the topic of raising the minimum wage versus implementing a universal basic income. Now, how many of you remember when things on the dollar menu actually cost a dollar? Or when you didn't need 2 years plus experience to get an introductory level job? Well, those days are gone, and that's because we keep raising the minimum wage. And the minimum wage is very harmful. That's because it doesn't address the root problems of poverty, where businesses are selfish. Now, implementing universal basic income doesn't deal with raising the minimum wage, and it solves all the problem implementing a minimum wage actually brings about. The minimum wage is harmful mostly because it makes an increase in prices in the economy overall. This can go from anywhere from our groceries being more expensive to going out to eat. Also, it has to do with our healthcare costs skyrocketing. Throughout the last few years, I've seen my healthcare raise over 100%, and every time I go to the grocery store, my basket gets smaller and smaller and smaller, even though I'm spending the same amount of money. And that's because raising the minimum wage helps lower the purchase power of our dollars. Today's goals are going to be, I will show you how the minimum wage is ineffective at fighting poverty. I'm going to introduce the universal basic income, and I'm going to show you the difference between the futures of raising the minimum wage or scrapping it all together and implementing a universal basic income. Today, we need to change. Like I've said before, the minimum wage increases prices, and that's because it is expensive for businesses. Whether it comes to paying your employees more, implementing more benefits for your employees such as healthcare, this costs a business more money. And these costs, according to Chad Halverson from whatiwork.com, gets passed on to the consumer, generally in the form of raising prices. In addition to raising prices, businesses can also cut hours. This has been seen to be happening since the Affordable Care Act has passed, that mandates businesses with employees working over 30 hours to cover their employees' health insurance. Now there have been many businesses who cap their employees at 29 hours. Also, raising the minimum wage or prices, it makes an increase in automation for businesses. This has been seen all over the country with McDonald's doing away with many of their cashiers and implementing in-store kiosks for ordering. And according to Elon Musk of Tesla, within 20 years, 12 to 15% of our jobs will be lost to automation. Now that we know some of the problems that come about from raising the minimum wage, let's talk about what the universal basic income actually is. A universal basic income is the government giving everybody in the country a stipend of money to provide for their basic necessities. Now, this is just your basic necessities, it's not your wants. It's enough to cover your insurance, your food, and your house. If you want more, you can go to work and make more money. And this is how the rich and the poor can benefit. Since everyone gets this, most rich people tend to put that money back into the economy. Poor people can use this money to cover their basic necessities, and they could go on to get more fulfilling careers. The left wing and the right wing have both supported this for a long time, but it stayed on the fringes of politics until recently, and it can appeal to both. On the left wing, it's a very progressive thought because everybody is covered. No one is discriminated against and everyone's basic needs are being met. On the right wing, which tends to not like spending as much money, it actually can be very popular because we have over 100 different government assistance programs today. Well, if you have a universal basic income that's handling all the money doled out by those 100 programs, you can eliminate almost all of them. You're also eliminating all the infrastructure and bureaucracy with them, so the government actually spends less money on maintaining these programs. And that's according to James Zurawicki of The New Yorker. Now, the universal basic income helps more because the minimum wage only deals with businesses taking advantage of the need for people to work. What I mean by this is that businesses can lower their wages because there's always somebody who really desperately needs that job to either provide for themselves or provide for their family. The universal basic income can help eliminate people settling for these jobs. So what will end up happening is that when no one absolutely needs this job, the false bottom of the wage market will rise up, and businesses will either have to raise wages to a fair amount where people will actually desire to work there, or they'll have to go under. And that's from Scott Santens of the Huffington Post. It helps, the universal basic income helps a lot more than just in financial ways. In areas where this has been trialed throughout the world, the universal basic income has had a lot of effects on society. Some of them are increase in sense of well-being in the community, a decreased risk of psychological disorders, a decreased risk of drug use in the community, an increased high school graduation rates, and increased longevity in that community, according to John Guarco of the Duke Chronicle. Now, we've seen what the minimum wage does and what a universal basic income is. When we look towards the future, we can see that the minimum wage will actually hurt more. That's because raising the minimum wage hurts a lot of low-skilled and young workers. What happens immediately when you raise the minimum wage to something higher is that people who were going for higher paying jobs tend to settle for that job that used to be lower paying, but also that's hurting younger workers from going out, building their resume, and getting new skills, so they're going to be out of the workforce for longer. Also, Ed Dolans of the Econo Monitor has a great series on the universal basic income, minimum wage, and government assistance in general. And minimum wage jobs, even if you raise them to $15 an hour, aren't enough for people who are currently receiving government assistance to want to get off government assistance and start working. Really quickly, that is because every time someone on government assistance goes to get a job, for every dollar they make on that job, they're going to end up losing $1.50 from their welfare. And why would you ever want to work when you're actually losing money going to work? The universal basic income does away with this. So people can have their stipend of money from the government to cover their needs, go out and work, and not lose any money. This has been shown in areas where it's been implemented to actually increase participation in the workforce. People will no longer have to struggle for their basic needs. Since they're no longer struggling to provide food for their families, they have more an opportunity to go out and get a higher education. They can go out and look for higher paying jobs and not have to settle for what they can get immediately. Also, you can increase entrepreneurship because people will not have to fear about failing and having to provide for their families when they're looking for work. Anything is possible for these workers without the fear of having to provide for their family. To recap, the minimum wage versus the universal basic income, the minimum wage has a lot of negatives. The minimum wage hurts the economy overall, and that's because businesses are selfish. The universal basic income helps with everything the minimum wage fails at. Now, the minimum wage, it increases prices, it reduces jobs, and it increases automation at a faster rate than it already is. The universal basic income helps provide the basic necessities for people, it helps people get better jobs, and it has a whole host of societal benefits. Now, we need you to do your part. You need to talk in your community about introducing a universal basic income, contact your representatives, and be nonpartisan about it. This isn't a Republican or Democrat issue. This is an issue affecting everyone in the future. Please keep thinking about this. Automation is coming no matter what. So eventually, this will affect you most, and you may need the universal basic income. Thank you very much.